And
Recording in progress.
good afternoon and welcome to this convening of the 26th September Pima Community College Board meeting, where we will discuss an action item and go over our bylaws. And with that, I would like to now call this meeting to order. The first item, we have two items. One is an action item. The other one is the bylaw review and vote. So I would like to turn it over to Council Mr. Sylvan to read the action item.
If you indulge me for a minute, let's do a quick roll call.
Yes, of course.
Dr. Meredith Hay.
Present.
Mr. Luis Gonzalez. Here. Ms. Maria Garcia.
Present.
Mr. Damian Klinko.
Here.
Ms. Catherine Ripley.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the one. Oh, sure. So just one other thing. I think just when you speak later, make sure you push down the button on the. That's okay. So your associate, Katie Derrick, is also on the remote video call.
Yes, I just wanted to make sure she was on. Katie, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, perfect, Katie. Thanks.
All right, thank you. So the first item we have is a recommendation concerning a construction-related contract. The Chancellor recommends the Governing Board authorize the Chancellor or designee to execute a contract with Pueblo Mechanical and Controls for the labor, materials, and supervision for the installation of mechanical and plumbing systems at the Desert Vista Culinary Kitchen to support year 3 of the grant-funded project. Total costs for the one-year agreement are not expected to exceed $370,000. If I just add one point of clarification, if that's okay. So the board previously approved capital budgets that include this project. We went out, the college went out and did competitive bidding for this particular, sorry, I think you used a state cooperative contract, but anyway, went through a competitive process to identify the contractor for this particular aspect of the project. So what we're asking for is approval for that contract. And the reason we're doing it at a study session instead of waiting until the October meeting is because of the way the project is progressing. If the board votes now, we can keep going without an interruption, but if we wait until the October meeting, it causes a bit of a delay in the project, and so it just seemed better for efficiency in the project to keep it moving, and so that's why we brought this item today.
Thank you for that.
Yep.
Do I hear a motion to vote on this?
So
action
moved.
item?
Second.
Moved and seconded, and I open it up to discussion. But first, Chancellor, would you like to make some remarks concerning this action item?
Madam Chair, is that working? It's working, okay. I have...
You have to hold it, Lee, I think.
I got to hold it, okay. Just as a point of clarification that Jeff just made, was like last time at the board meeting, we were asking for the ability to exceed the expenditure that you had approved earlier. That is not the case here. We're asking the board to approve an actual contract with the vendor in order to deliver on the services. So with that said, Dave, are you on to just be able to answer any questions if there are any?
I am, and Brandy is also, and Brandy would be able to answer any technical questions.
So Brandy's on as well?
I'm here.
Okay, excellent. So let me just take put it back to you, Madam Chair, and just ask if anyone has any questions.
Great, thank you. I'd like to open up for discussion or questions by the board. No questions or discussion? Or is there, sorry, Board Member Gonzalez, you have a?
Yes.
Okay.
It's not a question or maybe a comment in reference to the contract that we're going to be approving today. At what stage are we at, or we have not begun yet? Reference to this.
We have begun. I'll take that question if you don't mind, Board Member
Okay.
Gonzalez. We have begun the construction, and we're moving into the second phase. And this part of the contract will address both construction and equipment for mechanical units.
Okay. And when is the anticipated deadline to complete?
We're targeting December of this year.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Without further discussion or questions, I would like to now turn it over to a vote. All those in favor of passing this action item, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, nay. It passes unanimously. All board members voted aye. Thank you very much. Okay, with that, we move on to the task, the larger task at hand, which is our final, hopefully, bylaws review session. And with that, I would like to start by first saying thank you to our outside counsel, Mary Ellen Simonson, who has been tasked over the last almost a year now to help us with this process. And I would like to personally thank you on behalf of the board as well for your very objective and professional advice and facilitating of this task. Every 3 years, according to the Pima Community College process, we have to look at our bylaws for review and possible adjustment. So we were up for review. It's been almost a year. And I'm happy to say that after 4 meetings and some extensive discussions, most of which were unanimous and most of which we've agreed on, we have a lot of changes and a lot of reviews have been conducted, like I said. And so with that, I would like to pass it on to you, Mary Ellen. Thank you so much for helping us through this process.
Sure, my pleasure. Thank you so much. Let me just quickly remind and refresh everyone about
I'm sorry, I think you have to turn it on.
I think that should be good. Yeah, I think I'm on.
Okay, good.
Okay, thank you. Let me thank you again, Ms. Ripley, for your thank you to me. It's been my pleasure to work with the board during these 4 meetings and in between. And I think we've accomplished a lot, and I hope we will be able to accomplish even more today with these votes. Just a refresher on what the procedure will be today, which I think is the one that will move us along the most quickly. There are a total of 7 bylaws that have no, what I would call, options to further discuss. So these 7 bylaws have changes, but as you could see from the multiple summaries that you were provided, lengthy summaries that my colleague Katie Derrig prepared after each of the 4 meetings, and they, I think, very accurately summarize what each of your positions were during those meetings. So there are 7 of the articles that have no options that we need to discuss today, hopefully, and but they do have changes, and the changes that were made are shown in blue, mostly blue. There's a couple of red shown that are mostly just kind of tweaks for typos and that sort of thing. But mostly the blue ink is the one that you'll see on the screen here that are the various changes that the board had some consensus, and I would say tentative consensus, because obviously all of that is subject to your vote today. And so we hope that we can take those 7 articles first and go through them more rapidly than we can taking the time to go through the other 5 that do have some options, sometimes multiple options within them. And then the last 2 that we would go through are brand-new articles that we also will go through. So with that background, let's start with the 5, or the first of the 5, that do not have any options, which would be number 1, which would be Article 2. I'm sorry?
Yes, can we take a second? We have
Sure.
a board member with a question. Board Member Garcia.
Well, first of all, I'm asking permission to make a small statement.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to say, I am here primarily to protest. I have made a formal request to Board Chair Ripley that you reschedule the meeting until after the HLC final report has been presented to the college so that we as a board can review the recommendations and act upon the recommendations. I am aware that the recommendations will include defining the delegation of authority to the chancellor. This is a major concern as it will be for future board members. We have not addressed this issue. The election of the chair and the vice chair, the majority of the board proposes to continue the present practice and to continue control by not allowing equal representation by the elected members of the community. Voting on issues of major financial expenditures and other major considerations should not be considered by only a 3-2 vote, which is the vote when a 3-2 vote has been approved said items. A 3-2 vote is not a vote in the best interest of the community. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Mary Ellen, I turn it back over to you. Thanks.
Sure, thanks so much. All right, well, let's start with the first of the 7 articles that do not have any options, and there are 2 sets, as you saw in the hard copies. One is with the blue line, and the other is the clean. So let's look at the Article 2 first. And are we going to Article 2? Yeah, we're getting there. It's a little process, yeah. Okay, so this is the membership article. There was just a minor alteration there with "and take the oath." That's the only blue part. And then, do you have the clean copy ready, or is that just difficult to move to? Oh, well, let's not do that. I don't think we need to take the time. This is such a minor issue. So I think that it would be useful as we go through these that do not have options, and as everyone recalls, there was tentative consensus pending, of course, today and the vote. If we voted on each of these as we went along so that we don't have to go back through them, it's much more efficient. I see Mr. Gonzalez shaking his head, so I think you agree. All right, so does anyone want to make a motion with respect to this?
So I would, Chair Ripley?
Yes.
I'd move that we adopt bylaw Article 2, membership as presented with the blue line change.
Second.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
It's a point of order, just discussion. We would normally have a discussion.
Oh, that's right, I'm so sorry. This is, yeah, we're doing so first of all, we're going to do every article separately, so we do need to discuss every article. Before we take a vote, I open the floor up to discussion. Yes, Board Member Gonzalez.
Nothing major. What I have here in reference to the clean line, I was looking at it, was looking for the blue lines on it, but that's what it is up there?
Yes.
Okay.
And did you, Mr. Gonzalez, did you receive a hard copy as well of these that shows you pretty clearly the blue?
That was submitted the last time, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Okay, no question.
Without further discussion, all those in favor of passing Article 2 Bylaw Article 2, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, nay. It passes unanimously, 5-0.
This is a good start. Let's go to Article 3, which is the second that of the 7 that has no options. So Article 3 is representatives to the board. And as you can see on the screen, or in your hard copy if you have it with you, there are some blue lines there. And maybe just scroll down a little bit, Andrea. Okay.
Chair Ripley, may I offer a motion to adopt Bylaw Article 3 with the revisions as presented?
Yes, so moved, and, well, thank you for that motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
It was seconded. I open up discussion for Bylaw Article 3 to the board. Without any further discussion, all those in favor of passing this Bylaw Article 3, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
It passes 5-0. All those nay? Passes 5-0. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Mary Ellen.
good. Let's move to Article 6, which is meetings. And if you can just sort of gently go through, oh, yeah, we're not there yet, sorry. Yeah, there we are, meetings, yep. There's a few changes here and there in blue.
Chair Ripley,
Yes, Board Member Klinko.
can I offer a motion to adopt Bylaw Article 6 with the revisions as presented?
Yes, thank you. Do I hear a second?
Second.
With that, I open up the floor to discussion on Bylaw Article 6. With no discussion, all those in favor of passing Bylaw Article 6, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those against, nay. The article passes 5-0. Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to Article 7. Which is committees. Okay.
Chair Ripley?
Board Klinko.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we adopt Bylaw Article 7 on committees with the changes as presented.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
Second.
With that, with a second, I open the floor up to discussion on Bylaw Article 7. With no discussion, all those in favor of passing Bylaw Article 7, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those against? The Bylaw Article 7 passes 5-0 unanimously.
And then moving on to Article 8, which is discrimination prohibited. Oh, just go back up a little, yeah? It's just that those,
Chair Ripley, just as a point of or question,
Yes.
this is to our attorney. Since there was no changes to this bylaw, do we even have to have a motion since it just exists already?
you probably don't.
Okay.
I don't think there was any change here. Just making clear, yeah, so good point. I think we can avoid a motion there unless anyone had any discussion about it.
No, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Article 9, which is amendment of bylaws.
Chair Ripley,
Yes, Board Member Klinko.
I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to move that Bylaw Article 9, amendment to the bylaws, be adopted as presented with the changes.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
With that, I open the floor to discussion on Bylaw Article 9, sorry. I'm reading the Roman numeral. Yeah, I've got Bylaw Article 9. With no discussion, all those in favor of passing Bylaw Article 9, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Bylaw Article 9 passes 5-0.
Okay, And moving on to Article 11, orientation of new members.
Chair Ripley,
Yes, Board Member Glickman.
I would like to make a motion that we adopt bylaw Article 11, orientation of new members, with the changes outlined.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
With that, I open the floor up to discussion on bylaw Article 11. With no discussion, all those in favor of passing bylaw Article 11, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Bylaw Article 11 passes unanimously.
Good. Those are the 7 bylaws that have no options. We'll reserve the last 2, as I said at the beginning, because those are new articles, and we'll discuss those last today. So let's go back then to Article 1, Andrea. Article 1, which is the first bylaw that does have options that we need to discuss. And if we go down to option 1, just a little bit down to number 6 there. Okay. So option 1 was systematically and regularly monitor and oversee, as well as quarterly and annually evaluate the chancellor's job performance to determine the extent to which priorities, goals, and outcomes are being achieved according to board expectations in its board policies, and whether operational activities fall within parameters established by chancellor limitations policies. That was option 1. Option 2, systematically and regularly monitor, oversee, and annually evaluate the chancellor's job performance to determine the extent to which priorities, goals, and outcomes are being achieved to board expectations in its board policies, and whether operational activities fall within parameters established by chancellor limitations policies. So you see, option 1 is as well as quarterly and annually. Option 2 does not have the quarterly. Does anyone wish to make a motion with respect to either of those options?
Could I offer a Chair Ripley?
Yes, please.
So if we looked at both, since there are 2 in this particular article, and then we just did a single motion on the entire article, is that possible? And then we could have discussion? Well, so we do it as a single, so if we made a single motion.
I would do it on each of the set of options,
Okay.
because otherwise I think it'll be confusing. Yeah.
For clarity. Okay.
Chair Ripley?
Yes, Board Member Glickman.
So I would first move that we adopt option 2 in Article 6, the annual review of the Chancellor.
Do I hear a second?
Just an amendment, it's Article 1, Item 6?
Yes, Article 1, bylaw Article 1, number 6.
Second.
With that, with a second, I open the floor for discussion on bylaw Article 1, Section 6, Option 2.
I'm a little confused. Okay, so we're voting, you've recommended option 2, correct? Okay. So I guess, what would the discussion be on Article 2, that we accept it or not? I'm just...
The discussion is to do just that, to discuss the pros and/or cons on voting for adopting this option.
Okay, so my thinking on this is that I think that annually, it's too little, and regularly doesn't define. So I think it needs to be more exact. That's it.
Any other discussion? I think one of the discussion points that we did talk about during one of the 4 extensive meetings was the fact that we do every monthly at the board meetings, we do discuss, and the chancellor brings up his goals and his performance and the status of those goals and on his performance. So in essence, we actually do monitor and give him feedback monthly. So that's one of the reasons I would support option 2. Any other discussion? With that, all those in favor of passing option 2.
Mr. Gonzalez has it.
Oh, I didn't see. Please speak up. I didn't hear you. Board Member Gonzalez, did you have a point?
And, I know we are talking about option 2, but I was looking at option 1, not only on a quarterly basis, maybe by biannual review.
Yes, Board Member
For
Garcia.
Chancellor. Every 6 months.
I think what we're asking for is that, I understand that he presents what he's accomplished every month. Okay, we do get that. But I think what we'd like to do is actually sit down and just solely have a discussion on evaluations and the goals separately with no other action item. So in my view, I'm opting for option 1. I don't think we need to do it consistently, like, it just has to be so that we can discuss it. I know everybody thinks that, well, we can do this in a meeting, but with so much on the agenda, it would just be a lot clearer if it was just specific.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Board Member Hay.
just to be clear to the audience, we do an annual full deep dive on the Chancellor's goals and performance every year at a retreat, and we just finished that. So we actually spend an entire day on the goals, Chancellors, and goals and performance. So I suggest that that's fully covered, and we just covered it a few weeks ago.
We didn't do a goal this last retreat.
Well, that was the purpose of the retreat. Any other discussion before we vote? All those in favor of option 2, section 6, and article 1, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay?
We have 3 ayes, Board Member Hay, Board Member Klinko, and Board Member Ripley, and 2 nays, Board Member Gonzalez and Board Member Garcia. So the motion passes.
So, Chair Ripley?
Yes.
If I could offer another motion on Article 1, item number 11, I would move that we adopt option 1, no new subsection.
Second?
Article 1, item 11, option 1 was moved and seconded. I open the floor to discussion. With no discussion, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Nay?
3 ayes have it, with Board Member Hay, Board Member Klinko, Board Member Ripley, and 2 nays, Board Members Garcia and Gonzalez.
Chair Ripley?
Yes.
If I could offer a motion to adopt by law Article 1, authority, all of the additional changes that were not included in the 2 options we just discussed. In addition, I would like to offer an additional small text amendment to Article 1, Section 1, Number 10. I'd like to add at the end of this section the statement, "to avoid impugning the motives of other board members or staff in their communications."
Do I hear a second?
Second?
It was seconded, so we're opening it to discussion now. Yes, discussion. So, yes, Board Member Gonzalez, go ahead.
Can you repeat that, the addendum for number 10?
Of course. So
Can you read the whole thing?
absolutely. So to be clear on what the motion was, 1 is adopting all of the changes that are outlined in blue and red that weren't discussed in the 2 options, Section 6, Number 6, and Number 11 that we've already dealt with. And that on item 10, where it says, "participate productively as a team with fellow board members, chancellor, and administration, adhering to reciprocal shared governance principles and behaviors of trust, communication, consultation, contribution, cooperation, civility, transparency, inclusiveness, honesty, integrity, and respect," that we add, and avoid impugning the motives of board members or staff in their communications.
Can you give me an example of that?
So that would be in a debate, instead of debating the underlying issue, it would be assigning a reason or stating that Meredith, Dr. Hay, is voting a certain way because of X, Y, or Z. So instead of discussing the underlying issue, does Dr. Hay like fish on her iPads, we would say, would be saying something about, Dr. Hay's personality liking fish. So it's impugning the integrity of members within a debate. So instead of just focusing on the underlying, it's an attempt to avoid personalizing or making suggestions on why someone is voting a certain way.
Any other discussion?
I kind of feel that's covered in this language already. I'm just saying. In terms of integrity, civility, respect, communication, behaviors of trust.
Chair Ripley.
You go, yes, Board Member Klinko.
Dr. Hay, I would just say that this has been an ongoing issue that we've certainly experienced over the last 4 years, where during debates, there's been a continual attempt to assign rational reasons that somebody is voting a certain way instead of focusing on the underlying issue. And I think providing a little bit of clarification around this, which is what a number of legislators and other boards do, I think is perhaps appropriate.
Agreed.
Any other discussion? Yes, Board Member Gonzalez.
The only discussion, I know that you want this addendum to number 10, Ms. Mary Ellen Swenson. Were you informed of this addendum prior to right now?
Mr. Klinko did mention to me that he intended to make some sort of motion here, which he's entitled to do, certainly.
So we can modify at the point anytime we want to then. Is that correct?
Well, you can certainly make an amendment, of course, as we go through these.
Well, this is news to me right now, so, okay. That's all I wanted to know, making sure that...
Unless
I don't
the
see it
general
right
counsel has any other thoughts, but that would be my thought. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yes, like I mentioned, I don't see it black and white either here. So, okay.
Right, just that I would agree, board members can propose amendments to the proposed language.
Correct.
To the already, so this basically, sorry, I'm just going to, for clarity. So item 10 talks about teamwork and honesty, respect, integrity, and so the language you want to add, if you could repeat it one more time, really pretty much just solidifies that whole concept of respect and honesty and transparency.
And avoid impugning the motives of board members and staff in their communications. So it's really to help guide the discussion, which away from why we think somebody might be voting a certain way, to voting on the actual, like having a discussion that's substantive on the actual underlying topic.
Okay, so item 10, it doesn't change item 10, it sounds like it's bolstering it. It's making it clearer and bolstering the intent of item 10. It doesn't change it.
That's the intent.
Okay, got it. All right. Any other discussion on item 10? Yes.
No
Board Member
discussion, but
Gonzalez.
I protest the addendum for this number 10, because I did not have the prior knowledge, which you, Mr. Klinko, should have shared in the last 7-8 months or so. Thank you.
Any other discussion? With that, all those in favor of passing this item, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
Opposed?
3 ayes have it. Board Member Hay, Board Member Klinko, Board Member Ripley, and 2 nays, Board Members Gonzalez and Garcia. Next item.
Okay, next item would be Article 4, which is officers. So there are two sections that have options. Section 2 has the option, number 1, of adding any nominee for either chair or vice chair must have demonstrated compliance with all board bylaws and policies, as well as a commitment to such continued compliance. And then it would omit, board members shall rotate through these offices based on their original swearing-in date. Option 2 adds just the blue line portion and does not omit the board members shall rotate portion.
Chair Ripley?
Board Member Klinko.
I'd like to offer a motion that we adopt bylaw Article 4, Section 2, Option 1.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
With that, I open the floor to discussion on bylaw Article 4, Option 1, Section 2. Any discussion? Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Board Member Garcia.
Okay, so first of all, since the HLC has already in their draft added that the recommending and they're monitoring that the board, that the executive officers be rotated, I think it's premature to be, it's premature to be voting on this at this point in time.
Okay, point of order, I can't hear anybody. Point of order, I would like to first refer this to our council, since 3 of the board members have not seen the report you're talking about, so I can't address that. It hasn't been released. Yes, council.
So maybe there's a little confusion. HLC hasn't issued any decision or recommendation on the bylaws. I mean, the other issue is if at some point when HLC issues their decision, if the board in looking at that decision decides that further changes can be made, then that's certainly the prerogative of the board.
Not if the board is 3-2 and the majority votes whatever they want.
Chair Ripley, point of order. I mean, we're discussing a topic that's not agendized on today's meeting. We're talking about a report that will eventually come to the board in a formal way, and then it will be agendized. So maybe we can get some clarification on whether we should be discussing this scope of within the context of this at all.
Council? Advice?
Right, so the issue here is some board members apparently are privy to information that other board members are not. The information they're privy to is not an HLC decision. There hasn't been a decision at this point. And normally in any case, HLC is not going to make a specific, it would be very unusual in the scope of an HLC accreditation review to make any recommendation about the details of bylaws. That's not typically part of an accreditation review. But as I was mentioning before, if that does in fact happen, then the board can always take up this issue again. At least at the time being, there's been thorough discussion. There's not, at least from my perspective, an apparent reason not to conclude the process, particularly since what is required under the bylaws is that the board do a bylaw review every 3 years.
Thank you. And just for the record, as chair of this board, I have every intent of following in accordance with 2 councils present, our policy, our processes to the T, and with that, our task at hand today is to review and vote on the bylaws that are required to be voted on every 3 years. The report that you're talking about, I'm not privy to it. It hasn't been released, and until that time, we need to continue conducting within our fiduciary responsibilities, board activities. So with that, I would like to continue with the bylaws discussion and open the, I think we're now in discussion. Do we have any more discussion on this item? With no further, yes, we do have one point. Board Member Gonzalez.
And this is option 2, correct?
We are voting on option 1. Discussing option 1.
Well, the only concern that I have, as we've said before and continue to say, is that It's not the matter of opportunity to have the one-year terms. I know there's concerns about that, but I think that's the initial understanding for one-year terms. I know it's changed, but it's currently 2 years. But I'm very concerned and not happy reference to the 2-year terms, and that's what I'm trying to say. That's all I can say for right now, and thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? With that, all those in favor of approving Section 2, Option 1, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
Oppose.
It passes with 3 nays, Board Member Hay, Board Member Klinko, and Board Member Ripley, and opposed to 3 yeas, Board Member Hay, Board Member Klinko, and Board Member Ripley, against 2 nays, Board Members Garcia and Gonzalez. With that, the bylaw Article 4, Option 1 passes. Next item, Mary Ellen.
Sure. Section 3 of Article 4 has 2 options. There is currently no Section 4 in the current bylaws, so Option 1 is not to not add a Section 4. Option 2 is to add a Section 4 called term limitations, with subsections 1, no board member shall serve more than 2 consecutive terms as chair, and item 2 under a new Section 4 would be a board member shall serve no more than 3 terms as chair within a 6-year term.
Chair Ripley,
Board Member Klinko.
if I could make a motion on bylaw Article 4 that we adopt Section 3, Option 1, no new section for number 4.
Can you please repeat that?
Yes, so it would be Option 1 in the discussion that we're having, which is bylaw Article 4, Officers, Section 3, Option 1, no new Section 4.
Do I hear a second?
If I might, excuse me, sorry, I think the confusion is it's not in Section 3. The Option 1 and 2 are about
they're
a
new
new
sections.
Section 4, so I think that's where the
My
confusion might be.
apologies, because it's under Section 3, so let me rephrase that. Let me withdraw my motion and make a new
Yes,
motion.
please rephrase.
If I could make a motion that we adopt bylaw, so in bylaw Article 4, Officers, we choose Option 1, which is really to take no action, because we would not be creating a new Section 4. We're just affirming that there will be no new section.
Second.
Second, I open the floor to discussion on Article 4.
Chair Ripley?
Yes.
So I would just also note that in the proposal of Article 4, in and of itself has a redundancy. Since we've already adopted Option 1, which is 2-year terms, our terms on the board are 6 years, so it doesn't really make sense that you couldn't serve more than 3 terms, because that would be the entire duration of your service, and it would be redundant to even have that at all, because you would be over. So that in and of itself, this item really doesn't have a lot of validity based on our previous action.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that's why this has been a little bit confusing. With that, I would like to open it up for discussion, for further discussion. Yes? Anyone? Yes, Board Member Gonzalez.
Question, Ms. Mary Ellen, Ms. Swanson. I know it was put on the table for briefly. And what is your understanding of Option 3 that was just relayed to you?
Of Option 3, or?
That was what was mentioned a while ago.
I'm not sure.
No. There was a mention of Option 3.
You know, I'm sorry, I must have missed Option 3. Please tell me again, Mr. Gonzalez, what that
Well, it was
was.
proposed or put on the table by Mr. Klinko. That's what I'm asking.
Oh, about the redundancy issue, or is that what you mean?
No, I think he was very specific on it. What do you have knowledge of what Option 3 Yes, that's what I'm asking.
Mr. Klinko, maybe repeat what option 3 was. I'm sorry, I must
So
have
there
missed
are
that.
only two options. There's option 1, which is to take no action, which we are affirming which is what we're discussing per the motion. In section 2, under item 2, it says a board member shall serve no more than 3 terms as chair within a 6-year term. That becomes redundant since we have just adopted option 1 in section 2, which is 2-year terms. And since there would only be 3 of them, you could only serve them out. So it's a redundancy in the text because of the action we've just taken. I'm sorry I shared that as for clarification to create confusion. But there's no new option being proposed.
Yeah, it's probably unnecessary to share that in the sense that if that were passed and option 1 were not passed, then it would be relevant, Mr. Gonzalez. So I guess that's to answer your question, that's my understanding.
Okay. Just wanted to say it was a little bit of confusion coming in from left field, but when you put on the table and you were very adamant about option 3, it brings a little bit of concerns.
Chair Ripley, there is no option 3, just to be clear.
Yeah, there was never an option 3.
Yeah, but I think I understand what I think we all understand what Mr. Gonzalez meant. And so I do think that the way I explained it is option 2 would be relevant if option 1 had not already passed. That's what I understand. And so since it did pass, option 2 is probably not relevant at this point. Yeah. But I agree with you, Mr. Gonzalez. It was a little confusing. So I take your point.
Yes, it was.
I take your point.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any further discussion on this article? With no further discussion, all those in favor of passing option 1, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
This article, option 1, in bylaw Article 4 passes, so there will be no new section 4. It passes 3-2 with board members Hay, Klinko, and Ripley voting yay, and board members Gonzalez and Garcia voting nay. Next item, Mary Ellen.
Yes. Next item that has several options is Article 5, which is duties of officers.
Point of order?
Yes, board member.
So I believe that we still need to vote the underlying bylaw for Article 4. So Chair Ripley, if I may.
The underlying.
So there were changes to the bylaws that weren't included in the options?
entire-
Yes, the entire bylaw.
Good
So-
point. Good point.
The entire,
Yes, let's not-
yeah, go ahead.
Okay,
Yes.
I would move that we adopt bylaw Article 4 officers with the changes defined in the thing, including the changes, I guess, that we've approved.
Do I hear a second for bylaw Article 4, Sections 1 and Section 2 that were not discussed?
Second.
I open the floor to discussion on those items. With no discussion, all those in favor of passing bylaw Article 4, please signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed?
Opposed.
No.
2 opposed, and 3, 4. Board members Klinko, Hay, and Ripley voted yay, and board members Gonzalez and Garcia nay. The item passes. Next bylaw, Mary Ellen.
Sure. Next bylaw is Article 5, duties of officers. And option 1 under 11 is develop criteria for all members of a committee to fulfill, including board members, to include without limitation requirements for attendance, participation, and an evaluation process to assess the effectiveness of the participants. And then option 2 would be develop criteria for all members of a committee to fulfill, including board members, to include without limitation requirements for attendance, participation, and an evaluation process to assess the effectiveness of both the participants and the committee itself. So you can see we yellow highlighted there the difference between option 1 and 2, which is after participants and the committee itself.
I make a motion for option 2.
Do I hear a second? With that, we would like to discuss Article 5, Section 11, Option 2.
Chair Ripley?
Yes.
Mary Ellen, could you just provide us a summary of the different position points on why there are two options at all?
You know, I think that this was Ms. Garcia's point to add the committee itself. And Ms. Garcia, do you want to confirm that that was your position and the reason for your position? And Katie, in the meantime, if you, Ms. Derrick, could look at the summary and see if you can locate the portion of the summary that may deal with that particular point. Can you do that, Katie?
Yes, I'll pull it up.
Thanks. But in the meantime, Ms. Garcia, do you recall the reason that you wanted to add that language? Yeah, as I recall, sure. As I recall, you were wanting to not just have criteria for all members of a committee, but you wanted the criteria to also include the criteria for the committee as a whole. You know, what was the full committee criteria, not just the individual members. And I don't recall if you gave any specific reasons for that, but Katie may be able to find that. I do remember the discussion, and I do remember that you wanted the full committee to have criteria. And I don't know if that's because you were on a committee that perhaps there was some lack of clarity for the full committee, and there was some indication that you thought maybe just individual members of the committee were being assessed as opposed to the full committee. That's kind of the recollection I have. Maybe others might have other recollection.
Can I interject? This is Katie.
Yeah, go ahead, Katie.
I found in the memo from the April 7th meeting that it was actually Board Member Klinko raised a couple of points. He suggested for number 11 that we could add that it is assessing the effectiveness of the committee itself too. He just said he was unsure of having an evaluation of the effectiveness of just the individual committee members, and maybe we should do the committee as a whole.
Yeah, I knew one of you did that. And it's not a bad, I mean, if I could give an analysis, I mean, that certainly seems like a good option.
Chair Ripley?
Yes, Board Member.
I asked the question because nothing on it seems contentious, so I wasn't exactly clear why there were two options.
And I thought, Ms. Garcia, that I do remember you thinking that was a good idea, if I'm recollecting properly. Well, option 2 adds that there's going to be criteria for the effectiveness of both the participants on the committee and also the effectiveness of the committee itself.
Well, I think we need to be able to evaluate the committees.
Right. And that's what that adds. Yeah. And I remember you're agreeing with that, and Mr. Klinko, I didn't remember that you actually had made that. Thank you, Katie. That's helpful.
Thanks, Katie. Any other discussion? With that, all those in favor of approving Article 5, Section 11, Option 2, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? It passes unanimously. Thank you. Next item, Mary Ellen.
Sure. Next item is to add, the first option is no new subsection 12. The second option is to provide a monthly summary of material meetings with the chancellor to the other board members.
I make a motion to approve option 2.
Do I hear a second? I open up the floor to discussion on option 2, section 12.
Chair Ripley?
Yes.
I mean, having served as the chair and having conducted the business of the chair, there's already a lot of work, and it is our monthly meetings, and it's really, I think, the responsibility of individual board members to have personal meetings with the chancellor, to have items discussed, to provide and ask as additional duties, to have summaries, materials produced. I mean, it just creates another layer of work when there's already a lot to be done. I just would not support adding this to future chairs' roles, because sometimes, I mean, there are a dozen meetings throughout the month with the chancellor. There is the expectation that there would be an ongoing summary and who would maintain the summary. And I mean, there's just a lot of technical components, and I'm sure you can provide input as well on what that would take.
Well, I mean, my only comment on what you just said is that we do this, or at least as the chair, provides that information at the monthly board meetings. So any time we've attended something that's worth sharing or learned something that's worth sharing, this is the expectation to do this at our monthly meetings, whether it's an executive session or in the public session. But I would agree there is a tome of information, not that I'm opposed to extra work, but there is a lot of paperwork, a lot of emails, and quite a lot of info that could just simply be passed as it is on a monthly basis, like it already is being done at our meetings. That would be my only input to what you just said. Any other discussion? Yes, Board Member Garcia.
Okay, so, I don't mean to make your job cumbersome for any chairperson, but I do believe that if you want to be transparent, then it would be very helpful to know when you do have meetings with a chancellor, when there are specific subjects. Now, you may, okay, so, in my opinion, a lot of decisions are made before they come to the board, and it's already presented that way. Now, that's just my opinion, okay? It is an opinion. But I think that if those, when you do have a meeting, and if you document them or summarize, it doesn't have to be extremely detailed. It can be very brief. I mean, I've known of instances before you became chair that, that Klinko was attending facility meetings and stuff like that, and it's like, okay, so, and he was with the chancellor. We don't know what those are about, but I think that as a matter of transparency, it would ease our mind. It doesn't matter just for me, it's any board member that comes on board to have that. So I recommend that, that a report should be provided on all meetings that you have with the chancellor.
Any other discussion on that? Go ahead.
Madam Chair, I don't think it's necessary, so that's my position.
You don't think you don't think this option is necessary?
No, I think if any board member wants to know, you can certainly call the board chair and have that conversation. That's easily done, and that doesn't violate any open meeting laws because it's just two people. And if you want to know that, call Chair Ripley and ask her the question.
Thanks. Yeah, my only input to this is that the purpose, there are many purposes of having a retreat every year, and one of the things that I thought we got across was, well, first of all, transparency in a nonprofit organization such as this is absolutely a must, and it's quite hard to get rid of it, get away with anything. I mean, everything we do is transparent, and there's a certain modicum of trust that goes with that transparency. So anything that is worthy of sharing, I would hope that all board members would share that with one another for us to be successful as a board. We're supposed to act as a single unit, and I, for one, would not do anything unilaterally without letting you all know. I would never do anything that would hint of any nefarious activity with just a bilateral meeting with the chancellor. And that's ideal, I know, but I do think that that's what we should strive for, and I do think that's happening. I have not seen any kind of hidden agenda items since I've been on this board, actually. So I would be opposed to that. And it's not that it's going to be more cumbersome for me, but I just think that it just adds to a already very bureaucratic process that we have just by virtue of what we're doing now, and that would be unnecessary. That's my input. Yes, Board Member Gonzalez.
I just want to say as well to my colleagues here is that pretty much promotes and reinforces the transparency that we would like to have in reference to issues and concerns that can be brought up to the board. Again, I repeat, it promotes and reinforces transparency. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Anyone? Okay, with that, can you please repeat the motion?
I believe it's Ms. Garcia's motion.
Ms. Garcia, will you-
Ms. Garcia.
Sorry, it's been a long discussion. Can you repeat your motion?
Yeah, so I believe the motion is
For option 2, section 12.
For Article 5, Section 1, Item 12, move option 2.
Right, so all those in favor of passing Article 5, Section 12, option 2, please signify by saying yay.
Yay.
All those opposed?
Opposed.
Nay.
Opposed?
You mentioned nay first?
Did I?
No, it was
I said yay.
to approve.
Oh, I thought
Oh, I heard nay.
Okay, let's start over. We're all a little tired here.
Please do.
All those in favor of passing Article 5, Section 12, Option 2, please signify by saying yay.
Yay.
Yes.
All those opposed, nay.
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 Nay. So the article does not, or the Option 2, Section 12 in bylaw Article 5 does not pass.
Chair Ripley,
Yes, Board Member Clinko.
if I could make a motion to pass the remainder of bylaw Article 5, duties of officers.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
With that, I open the board up for discussion for bylaw Article 5 in its entirety. No discussion? With no discussion, I would like to ask all those in favor of passing bylaw Article 5, please signify by saying yay.
Yay.
Yes.
Yay. All those opposed?
Nay.
Bylaw Article 5 passes 3-2 with 3 yeses, Board Member Hay, Board Member Klinko, Board Member Ripley, and 2 noes with Board Member Gonzalez and Board Member Garcia. Mary Ellen, next item.
Yes. We are now moving to Article 10.
Article 10, Code of Ethics.
Right. And Article 10, in Section 5E, a Roman numeral, small Roman numeral 3. Okay, so 5E. Ms. Garcia, did you have a question? 5E, yeah. E, small e, and then small Roman numeral 3. And so,
Hold on a minute,
Sure.
please.
Chair Ripley, could we take a 3-minute break? Is that possible?
Yes, Board Member Kalinko requested a 3-minute break, and I agree. Let's take a 3-minute break.
Everyone can review this longer item during the break.
Yes, I think we're all, yeah, we've got a lot to go, so go ahead if you need a biological break. check one. Okay. All right, it looks like we have everyone back from our break, so I'd like to reconvene the meeting. And we left off with Article 5, Bylaw Article 10. Oh, sorry.
Well, actually, we're going to go back just for a moment. Sorry, Andre. We're going to go back. Jeff Sylvan just pointed out something that we need to address in Article 5, which we didn't have, options for. But if we go back to Section 1, number 10, so Article 5, Section 1, number 10, yeah. Yeah. There we go. Article 5, Section 1, number 10, right on the first page there. So one of the things that we were trying to do is to try to be consistent. And so because we already have voted against the language in another bylaw, we already had voted against the language in number 10, which is to ensure the board completes an annual evaluation of the general counsel. We already previously had rejected that by a vote. So in order to be consistent, I think we want to have discussion about that as though it were shown as an option here. But since it was rejected earlier in one of the articles, to be consistent, we either should delete it here to be consistent so we don't go back over the same thing, or if anyone wants, just to open it up, if you want to have more discussion about it, just to be transparent, let's do that. Unless you're satisfied, we've already rejected that, and we don't need any more discussion. So, Ms. Ripley, do you want to open it up for that discussion? Have I made it more confusing?
Yes, so we could, let's
Madam Chair?
discuss.
I'd like to
Yes.
make a motion
Yes, please.
on Article 5, Section 1, Item 10 be stricken and deleted.
Second.
The item number 10 on Article 5 has been proposed to be stricken. I open the board up for discussion. Yes, Board Member Garcia.
I don't think that it hurts to evaluate the general counsel. I think it should remain here, primarily because as he serves the board and the college, and right now he only presently, he responds directly to the chancellor as his staff. And of course, you understand that I believe that general counsel, that the board should have their own general counsel. I think that as an amendment, that we could do an evaluation, and then that way he can understand what our issues might be and then be able to correct them.
Any other discussion? Thank you.
Can I add? So when a board member shares concerns with me about whether it's general counsel or another employee that reports directly to me, I usually have a conversation with them about that.
So there are two, go ahead, I'll let you go.
Just as a point of clarification, Chancellor Lambert, you conduct annual reviews of all of your employees.
That is correct. And depending on the nature of the concern and my conversations, in this case with Jeff, that determines whether that ends up in the evaluation or not.
Just one other point of clarification. So my client is the college, and we have a board policy about that. So if a board member does not think that legal counsel for the college is doing an adequate job for whatever reason, then that concern should be expressed, because ultimately the board is the highest level decision maker for the client, the college, not the chancellor.
So there's a couple things I need to add. So just for clarification, so it was moved and seconded to strike this from Article 5 because we had already voted against it.
Correct.
So would have been redundant either way.
Well, it would have been inconsistent.
It would have been inconsistent with the previous, so we've already voted this down. And once more, I'm just going to say it out loud, once more, the chancellor is our employee, and council works for the college, but it is our job as the board to keep the chancellor accountable, and everybody under him is accountable to the chancellor, to include council. And the other thing, just for everybody's, and sometimes we forget, but repeatedly I've asked Jeff, and he's the council, Mr. Sullivan, if the board does require for whatever reason, nothing against our council, outside counsel, for instance, in this case, we hired Mary Ellen Simonson, an outside counsel, to be an objective, non-partisan, if you will, facilitator of the bylaws. So anytime the board ever needs or desires outside counsel, we can do that. Hiring a full-time counsel would be that's a whole different subject and requires budgetary discussions as well. So those are the only points I just wanted to bring up. Yes, Mr.
Just
Sullivan.
one other thing, I'll just mention it to help with the discussion. So if there's a provision in the bylaws that says the board's going to review general counsel on an annual basis, then you have to do that. Not having it in there does not preclude the board from doing that. So if later this year, whether it says it or not, the board as a whole decides, you know what, let's do an evaluation of general counsel, there's nothing that precludes you to do that. So I just, in case there was any thinking about that, if it's in the bylaws, you have to do it. If it's not in the bylaws, you still have the authority to do it, it's just not required.
And I assume the board would vote whether you wish to take that step.
As we should. I mean,
Sure.
Oftentimes we don't tell, and we should tell you when you're doing a good job. But when you're not, or when you do something, if you ever did something we didn't agree with, it's our job to tell Chancellor to fix that, remedy it in any way. And if it requires, some type of evaluation, so be it. Any other discussion on this point? Okay, so with that, we are voting to strike item 10 from Article 5. With that, all those in favor of striking Article 10, please signify by saying aye or yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Nay.
3 yeses, Board Member Hay, Board Member Klinker, Board Member Ripley, and 2 noes, Board Member Gonzalez and Board Member Garcia. So it is passed that item 10 is stricken to be consistent with the previous motions we passed. So now we can jump forward, Mary Ellen, to the
Yes.
next bylaw.
We can jump forward to Article 10. Yep. And Article 10, it would be in the Section 5, which has a heading of Procedural Responsibilities, and it would be down below there under subsection E. 5E, small e. And if you recall, there was a considerable amount of back and forth about, if one of the board members wanted to make a request for substantial or potentially substantial documentation, and there is language already about the 4 hours. If the information requests will involve more than 4 hours of college staff time per request, it shall require the agreement of a majority of the board. And so there was a lot of discussion about this, and we wanted to give sort of an alternative a little bit to this option. And so this option would basically say that if information requests that involve, instead of more than 4 hours, if information requests that will involve a significant amount of time or impact on a priority task shall be referred by the chancellor to the board chair for the board determination if the board member and chancellor cannot reach agreement and shall require the agreement of majority of the board. So that was an alternative to not put the 4 hours in there of college staff time, but really have a significant amount of time or impact on a priority task shall be referred by the chancellor to the board chair for board determination if the board member and chancellor cannot reach agreement and shall require the agreement of majority of the board. And then prior to that, the language would be prior to a vote by the board. However, the board member must consult with the chancellor or designee to first determine if the request can be narrowed, or alternatively, if a work session on the subject of the requested information can be scheduled as soon as possible, at which relevant information will be provided during the session. To the extent those alternatives do not resolve the request, all other options should be explored before the board vote is necessary. So that language was agreeable to the board. We just were looking at potentially taking out that 4-hour aspect and defining it a little differently and defining the procedure a little differently. And I think, Mr. Sylvan, you may want to speak to this because I think you had some thoughts about why this might be a more useful alternative.
So actually, it was based on a conversation with the chancellor, and the point he was making is sometimes time alone is not the only consideration. So for example, perhaps a staff member is working on a very high priority item, and it may or may not be a good idea to divert them from that to fulfilling the board member's information request, so that it might be helpful to acknowledge that and make sure that's clear that that could be one reason why there would be a trigger discussion between the chancellor and the board member about timing, priority, et cetera, which hopefully they would resolve and it would never become a board issue. But anyway, that was the main point, was there may be times when, for a variety of reasons, it's not in the best interest to have a staff member drop what they're doing to address a board member inquiry. Maybe it needs to be pushed off to a later date. Again, not that we don't want to be responsive. Staff don't want to be responsive to boards, but sometimes the press of other business or the importance of other business might mean that that should take priority. So that's what it was, to make that explicit, and again, just open the door to make sure that that would be a factor to be considered and discussed to make the decision about what's the priority to be given to a particular board member information request. Sorry, that's probably more explanation than you wanted, but that was the idea.
No, it's good. I think it was a well-intentioned alternative, and certainly does give the procedure a little more substance in terms of consultation with the board chair as well. So that's the option.
So Chair Ripley?
Yes, Board Member Klinko.
So just because there's only one option in this, what I would do is I would move that we adopt bylaw Article 10, Code of Ethics, with the substitution of Section 5E3 with the new text as presented.
Do I hear a second to that?
Second.
With that, I open the floor to discussion. Yes.
Chair Ripley, so Chancellor Lambert, Mr. Sullivan, do you think by not having, I mean, that we've always had this sort of time frame, and do you think by not including a specific time, like what does that entail? I mean, we know collectively that's 4 hours or less, but we're defining significant and sort of modifying it. In the future, is significant 30 hours, is significant. And I just wonder whether we're opening the door by not having a specific sort of time frame, but I'd be curious just to hear your thinking.
Sometimes it's not so much about the amount of time, because one of the things I usually do is I'll ask, how much time is this going to take? person can't always tell you right on the spot how much time it's going to take until they start to dig into what is being asked for. Then they can tell me how much time it's going to take. That's time being spent just on that facet of the request, right? I think that's why not having a time element, I can go and find out what's involved, have a conversation with any one of you who are asking, and then based on that conversation, then determine how important is this to elevate it into the order of priority, regardless of the amount of the hours involved, right? Because it shouldn't be about the time spent as much as how important is that information to the board member relative to your responsibilities. And in some cases, as noted here, maybe we just need to have a study session on the topic, as opposed to spending all this time trying to get one person a set of information. So that's why I think just having that flexibility, it's really more about the dialogue and the communication than it is about the specific items sometimes.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Yeah, I just would like to add that this is a really important bylaw, Article 10, and it was very well written. Thank you, Mary Ellen, for really helping to come up with some succinct language here, because the intent is very important, that we see that board members need to have access to information, and they're welcome to it, and the chancellor and the staff will do everything possible to ensure that board members get the information. But I do agree, if anything is important enough that requires more than 4 hours of work and tomes of information, it probably should be a study session, which would then benefit all of us, as opposed to one board member. So, so I definitely agree with this language. Thank you.
Sure, and the additional language in black ink was really pretty much a consensus, obviously was a consensus, because it previously at one of the earlier meetings, everyone thought it needed to be updated and given some reasonable amount of procedure. So this just tries to amplify that in a positive way.
All right, okay, any other discussion? With no further discussion, all those in favor of passing Article 10 by law, Article 10, Code of Ethics, please signify by saying yes or yay.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. All those opposed? I believe there was Board Member Hay, Board Member Klinko, Board Member Garcia, Board Member Ripley. Board Member Gonzalez, I didn't hear your response. Yes, so this article, by law, Article 10, passes unanimously. Thank you. Mary Ellen, I'll
Sure.
pass to
All
you.
right, yeah, we're getting close. Article 12 is response to complaints. And there are several different options here. Let's start with option 1 under Section 3. Section 3 is process for handling specific types of complaints. And option 1 reads, the chancellor shall confirm to the board, and there was a lot of discussion about this. This was something that was quite important to everyone. Option 1 reads, the chancellor shall confirm to the board that the complaint has been received, consult with the board regarding the anticipated process to be used to investigate and address the complaint as defined in Section 2 above, and inform the board how the complaint has been or will be addressed and resolved. To the extent any board member requests that the board receive additional information or periodic updates as to the process and progress of addressing the complaint, the chancellor shall do so before any final resolution is made. At no time is a board member to share such information with the complainant. Option 2 would be the chancellor shall confirm to the board that the complaint has been received, consult with the board regarding the anticipated process to be used to investigate and address the complaint as defined in Section 2 above, and inform the board how the complaint has been and will be addressed to the extent that any board member requests that the board receive additional information or periodic updates as to the process and progress of addressing the complaint. The chancellor shall do so, period. At no time is a board member to share such information. And so I think the difference there is the language in option 2 that is omitted, which is before any final resolution is made.
Do I hear a motion?
I make a motion.
Yes, Board Member Garcia, go ahead.
I make a motion to adopt option 1.
Do I hear a second? It has been seconded. I open the floor for discussion on option 1.
Madam Chair, can I get a little bit more understanding of, before any final resolution is made, Chancellor, maybe that you can help me with this. I'm trying to understand the difference between these two, really. Anybody?
Could we, to that point, could we have a reading of the summary?
Katie, can you look back at the summary?
Yeah, let me pull it up.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, the basic difference is it's a timing issue. Under the option that's now on the floor for a complaint that rises to this level, the chancellor essentially would always need to confer with the board member before making a decision on the complaint.
And what would be, Mr. Sullivan, what would be an example of a timing issue that you've run into so that we have a, you know, if you have one, we have a kind of a concrete point why that would be difficult?
So let's say it's a significant complaint where discipline or termination might be involved, or a significant complaint relating to a misuse of college assets. So this would require the chancellor, if a board member asked, then the chancellor would have to discuss the issue with the board member before making the final decision. So the issue with that, the implication of that is potentially it delays the decision. And I guess what I would say is you're coming back to basically an issue of trust and delegation of authority between the board and the chancellor. Do you trust the chancellor to make the decision and then let you know what happened, or do you need to make sure the chancellor talks to you before making the decision? I mean, if you kind of cut to the chase, that to me is the difference.
I also think perhaps if I may offer a more extreme case, which actually does happen, is if there was a Title IX complaint and there was actually the safety of a student or an employee involved, then a decision would have to be made immediately to possibly remove or physically remove an employee from the premises. And we couldn't wait for the board to convene to make that decision, something like that.
At the risk of disagreeing with the chair.
Oh, no, that's fine. That's
so in a Title IX case, if we had a situation like that, the college would take interim measures. No offense, board members, we would not wait to talk to you. We would just take steps to protect the interests of all parties involved, which might include separating individuals, removing someone, et cetera. This would be more like there's been a hearing, we've done the interim steps, the case has gone to hearing because there are contested issues, and then a decision has to be made about what happens to the individuals involved based upon that final determination. So I'm just saying that because it's not like, if we need to do something to protect the safety or interests of someone, we're just going to do that.
right, but this would prevent that.
No, so what I'm saying is the way I read this, at least this is the final resolution. In a Title IX case, interim measures are exactly what they sound like. So removing someone from the premises because we think they represent a significant risk of threat is not a final resolution. That's an interim measure. A final resolution would be termination, some significant discipline after a hearing where a hearing officer would make a decision about what happened more likely than not and make a recommendation about what the final outcome would be. So that's a final resolution as opposed to do we remove someone for safety.
So
Great,
would there be, I'm sorry.
Board Member Klinko.
Well, I have a procedural
Yes.
But I think let's complete the discussion before I do that.
Sure. I wonder, based on this discussion, would there be any wisdom in adding to option 1 after shall do so before any final resolution is made, unless the language, unless the chancellor's unless the chancellor determines there is an immediate need to proceed without board consultation.
Madam Chair, I do not approve of that. I think it's taking authority away from the chancellor, period.
Okay.
And I don't want to do that.
So just so procedurally, so because these two are very similar, what I'm going to do is offer an amendment to just strike the phrase before any final resolution is made, which brings the two into the same. So now there's an amendment, I believe there'd have to be a second.
So do I hear a second?
Right, so the first question would be whether it's accepted as a friendly amendment, which based on the shaking of the head, the answer is no, so then yes, we would
Okay.
have it then the amendment needs to be seconded and a vote.
I'm sorry, I thought the motion was made by Chair Garcia, Member Garcia.
Yeah, so to be very clear, so what was the original motion was to adopt option 1. They are exactly the same, these two options, except for this phrase, which I am adding, I'm suggesting we making a motion to add an amendment to strike before any final resolution is made. It's not being accepted by the original motion maker, but it can be added through a second and then a vote.
Can we just vote on
Well, then
up
we
or
will just
down on
have to
option
say-
1?
It's just a procedural difference. It's the same, but it's different.
It's the same thing, it's just procedural.
Okay, that was confused. Okay, so, any further discussion?
This is, I have the summary of when this was discussed, if we would still like that to be read.
No.
I think the board thinks we don't need that, Katie, but thank you very much for looking at it. Appreciate it.
Thank you. So, any other discussion? Yes.
Okay.
Board Member Garcia.
So I think that it would be beneficial to have a discussion prior to final resolution or determination of something like this happening, primarily because, since we have encountered numerous lawsuits that we need to know as a board that things are being done to protect our faculty and our staff. And so I don't see any harm. I think they would just, again, it's a matter of information and transparency about what's really going on. And hopefully, we'll come to a better understanding.
Okay, thank you for that point. Board Member Garcia, I actually have a question related to that then to council or chancellor. Would this mean, and I actually don't know, would this mean how many complaints a week or a day do we get? Would this be an inordinate ask for the board to have to convene? In other words, how often will this happen?
So the way complaint is defined, it's a possible violation of law or college policy. So whenever there are significant instances like that, we're reporting those to you now. The difference is, would we have to have a consultation before making a decision about how to resolve it? And now, that depends on the nature of the case, right? In some cases, we do go to the board before resolving a complaint and ask for board authority when it rises above a certain dollar amount or significance. So the difference would be we do that every time instead of using our judgment as to either using our judgment because of the significant nature of the claim, or, like I said, in some instances, we have to go to the board because the authority necessary to resolve it exceeds what the board has delegated to the chancellor. So think about, I guess the way to answer the question is, if you think about every case that I've briefed the board on in executive session, we would, an implication of this is before resolving any of those, we would have to consult with the board.
Right, so we're doing that now, anyway.
The board gets status updates. We don't always consult with you about what the resolution is going to be before that happens. Sometimes we resolve it because it's at a level below the authority already delegated to the chancellor. If it's a really significant case, which at this point, there's only been a handful of those in the 9.5 years I've been here. Those we do go to the board with and get authority first.
Okay, thanks. Any other discussion? Yes, Board Member Garcia.
So Jeff, you mentioned the fact that it was, I guess, from my understanding, a dollar amount.
So one example would be, yes, so for example, the chancellor has a certain amount of expenditure authority, so let's say, so hypothetically, let's say there's some kind of claim with the college, and we could settle it for $30,000. The chancellor has $250,000 of authority, so we wouldn't necessarily go to the board and say we're going to settle it for $30,000. If the dollar amount were above the chancellor's authority, then we would have to go to the board for authority because it exceeds his delegated authority. So that's why, so yes, dollar amount would be a factor we would look at.
Well, I think, in my view, I understand that he has a $250,000 authority, but and I know that the majority of the cases that are settled are about $60,000 from what I recall. Okay? So I really do believe that they should come before the board. Maybe if you want to fix a different amount, I'd be...
Madam Chair, call the question, please.
Yes, Board Member Hay.
Call the question.
Okay. No more discussion. All right. All right, thank you, Board Member. I would now like to ask that all those that are in favor of passing, let me repeat this, bylaw Article 12, Section 3, Option 1, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay.
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 Nay. So the motion does not pass. It's 3 nays, Board Member Hay, Board Member Klinko, Board Member Ripley, and 3 yeses, Board Member Garcia, Board Member Gonzalez.
2.
2, sorry.
Chair Ripley?
Yes.
Could I offer an alternative motion to pass option 2?
Do I hear a second?
Second.
I open the floor for discussion on option 2 now. Any discussion? Any further discussion? With no further discussion, all those in favor of passing bylaw Article 12, just section, sorry, because we've got another one, right? In section 3, option 2, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Those opposed, nay.
Nay.
Option 2 passes 3-2 with 3 yeas, Board Members Klinko, Hay, and Ripley, 2 nays, Board Members Gonzalez and Garcia. We go to the next item, I believe still an option in
Correct.
Article 10, or 12, sorry.
Right. And that would be on the next page, page 2, option 1 under number 2 is in the case of a complaint about the conduct of the chancellor. The difference here between the two of these is under subsection A, it says the recipient of the complaint, including individual board members, shall notify the board chair and college general counsel of the complaint, who shall notify all board members within 48 hours of receiving the complaint. And under option 2, the change there is, instead of within 48 hours of receiving the complaint, it is as soon as possible.
Chair Ripley?
Board Member Klinko, yes.
If I could make a motion to adopt option 2.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
With that, I open the floor to discussion on option 2. Board Member Garcia.
I oppose option 2 because I believe that we should have a discussion. And I mean, you should be able to notify us within 48 hours, even if it's an email. I don't see what the problem is with that.
Any other discussion on that? All right, with no further discussion, yes, Board Member Gonzalez.
I also concur with Ms. Garcia, but reference to the as soon as possible doesn't give us a timeline. It can be a week, it can be a month or so. But I think with the 48 hours, pretty much keeps it more strict and in line, in reference to compare to this as it says, notify board members as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, and I think we did have a discussion on this, and I do appreciate your comments, but also that option, to me, would leave this open to some serious possibilities of breaching by any one of the board members if they didn't respond in 48 hours. Some of us might have, whatever reason, that we don't have access to a phone or email, then we would be subject to breaking bylaws. And that opens it up to a whole plethora of other issues. Yes, Board Member Garcia.
The reason that we wanted this one was because it's taken, sometimes it's taken over a month for us to know when a complaint was filed. So I think that, you know, that's why we made this recommendation about 48 hours. It needs to be timely.
Okay, thank you. I'm unaware of that, but appreciate your input. Any other discussion? With that, all of those in favor of, hold on, Article 12, passing Article 12, Section 2, I'm sorry, is this Section 2? Section 3, sorry, Section 3, subsection 2, option 2. Please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
This passes 3-2 with 3 yeses. Board Member Hay, Board Member Klinko, Board Member Ripley, 2 noes, Board Member Garcia and Board Member Gonzalez. Mary Ellen, next item.
So before we do that, I think we need to
You need
pass
to
the rest of the
pass
changes
the
to this.
full amount.
For the entire
The
Article
entire-
12?
Yeah.
Chair
So we're
Ripley.
finished with Article 12. Okay, yes, Board Member Klinko.
Yes, Chair Ripley, I'd like to move that we adopt Article 12 with all of the other changes as presented.
Do I hear a second? With that, any discussion on passing bylaw Article 12? With no further discussion, all those in favor of passing bylaw Article 12, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Those opposed?
Nay.
Bylaw Article 12 passes 3-2 with Board Members Hay, Klinko, and Ripley voting yes, and Board Members Garcia and Gonzalez voting no. With that, I turn it over to Mary Ellen.
Thank you. Okay. We're on the last two here. The last two are Articles 13 and Article 14. These are 2 new articles that would be added to your bylaws. So let's start with Article 13. And the options are, do we add this or do we not add this? And Article 13 is accreditation. The board is committed to adhering to the eligibility requirements and accreditation standards and policies of the accrediting body for the college and of the eligibility requirements and accreditation standards and policies required. Now, I believe, Ms. Garcia, you had offered this.
Do I hear a motion to pass bylaw Article 13?
Did you wish to?
There are no options. This is the entire article.
No, did you wish to move that it be adopted?
Yes, please, I make a motion to adopt this article.
Do I hear a second? I open the floor to discussion on adopting a new article, Article 13, accreditation.
Chair Ripley?
Yes.
Is there an explanation for what is the intent of this article and why it's being added?
Well, I think that we all need to abide by the accreditations, and I don't believe that we're doing that as an entire board, not just me and Luis, but all of us. Thank you. And there's also some additional issues that I don't care to discuss, but anyway, I think this is a good thing to pass.
Madam Chair, it seems to me that the conduct of the board in the previous articles addresses, obviously, the board intent to make sure that college stays accredited. I'm not sure that this is needed, quite frankly.
Thank you. Yes, we have a pretty extensive, thank you, Mary Ellen, for helping us with the wording on the article on Code of Ethics. And I'd also like to add that we vowed, and we took an oath to do just this when we took our oath of office, to basically fulfill our duties and adhere to the accreditation and all of our duties, our fiduciary duties as a board. So I would agree with Board Member Hay. Any other discussion on this new article? With that, I would like to take a vote. All those in favor of voting for bylaw Article 13, please signify by saying yay or yes. Yes. All those opposed?
No?
Nay.
Nay. The bylaw Article 13 does not get passed. A vote of 3 nays, by Board Members Hay, Klinko, and Ripley, and 2 yeses with Board Members Gonzalez and Garcia. Mary Ellen, I think this is our final.
Yes, this
Article 14?
Yes, this is the last one. It's the same situation. The two options are no new Article 14, or adopt the article in whole or in portions. And Katie, I don't know if there's any specific point that you want to make about this, but I believe, Ms. Garcia, you offered this as an additional article on vice chancellors.
Okay, can I
Make a motion?
Can I make a motion to accept this article, I guess?
Do I hear a second?
Do I have to do section 1 and 2, or is it together? Together.
I think you
Okay,
could,
I need to ask some questions, though, before this. Is that okay?
During discussion, yeah, we can do that during discussion. So this is an article that you presented, Article 14, and you just moved to pass Article 14, and now we need a second. Seconded, so I open the floor now to discussion.
Okay. So I have this question for Chancellor Lambert. Section 1, the provost and chief academic officer shall be the chief administrator office of the college after the chancellor. Can you tell me who the chief academic officer is?
The chief academic officer presently is the provost.
But you've got the provost and chief academic officer.
Point of clarification. Chair Ripley?
Yes, Board Member Klinko, go ahead.
Mary Ellen.
Oh, wait a minute, I'm
this was
sorry, I'm reading it
provided
wrong. I'm reading it wrong. I'm reading it wrong, okay. Okay, shall be the, okay, that's right. Okay, so then what role does the chief of staff have in here? I mean, it's not listed, but I just want to know, because if the provost is supposed to do whatever they need to do to represent you when you're gone, yet in most cases, isn't it the chief of staff that does that, or am I wrong?
So I guess I'm confused by what you're asking, because the provost's role is the chief academic officer. So this article here, this section is talking about when I'm temporarily gone, who would then be serving as the chief administrative officer,
Right?
right? That presently, the way it's done is I will rotate among the 3 executive vice chancellor level individuals. So there isn't a person that I tap. Sometimes it's because one person, two people are gone, and then I have person X do it. But also it's a succession planning, professional development opportunity for one of those three individuals. So there isn't a person that I tap presently.
But this thing here says that if, okay, but it's a new one.
But this is a new one, so
Right.
what you're basically saying,
Yes.
based on the motion, is that that person will be the person who's currently in the provost role. That's what this says.
Right.
But point of clarification, Chair Ripley?
Yes, Board Member Klinko, go ahead.
Mary Ellen, where is the origin of this article? Like, where did it come from? Who provided it to you, and why is it here?
Ms. Garcia provided it. And there's no other origin that I know of.
So what problem are we trying to solve with this article?
Well, I think what I'm trying to do is ensure that the provost is the responsible second in command when you're not here. And then, of course, if anybody else, say if she's not available, then it would be between the two of you assign somebody else to do it.
Madam
Now,
Chair?
the other thing too is, let me see. Okay, so we're only doing section 1, that's it.
Yes, Board Member Hay.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just so for the audience, it's my understanding that delegation of administrative authority in the absence of the chancellor is up to the chancellor and not delegated by the board. And so depending on who's there and who's in town, that's totally up to the chancellor's discretion and not the business of the board.
Thank you. And again, Chancellor Lambert, you stated that currently what you do is you choose from amongst three of your most senior administrators who are vice chancellors, and for the reason you've given was for professional development, and also one of the three or two of the three may be out of town. So that's your reasoning behind it.
That is correct, Madam Chair. There is sometimes the outside possibility that the four of us are not available, and then I have to go down the line to another person who's a vice chancellor. That has been very rare, but there have been times when that particular scenario could come up, especially around the holiday season.
And Dr. Lambert, would you consider this to be one of your operational duties that's delegated to
Yes,
you
this
by
is
the
a
board?
day-to-day management piece. I'm always making sure that I have someone who's responsible, in charge, in the event I am not available.
And would you say sometimes that depends on what's going on? Say if there's some ginormous facilities going on, you would want this most senior executive possible to be in your stead if you had to be gone.
Right. So I obviously, depending on what's happening, and if I know that in advance, sometimes I'm going to choose someone based on who's the most experienced of the individuals to be in that role.
Okay. Any other discussion on bylaw Article 14?
I have one more question.
Yes.
Okay, it isn't always the case, Chancellor, that you pick a vice chancellor. For example, I mentioned Tom Davis. In some cases, he has spoken for the provost. The all-college days.
Right, so I think there's two different concepts that are getting mixed up here. So one is, it is true that sometimes another administrator gets tapped to speak in the place of someone who's not available for a particular event, or there might be a meeting where an administrator or the chancellor would say, you know, I've got to be in two places at once, I can't be at both of these meetings, so he taps someone to say, you go to that meeting in my stead. That's different than what this article is talking about. This is talking about the chancellor is going to be in Washington, D.C. for a legislative conference. He's going to be gone for most of the week, so someone has to serve as the CEO temporarily. That's what this article is talking about. And the three people that normally get picked, one of the three, it's either Dolores Duran served as the provost, it's David Duray as the president of campuses, or it's David B. as the executive vice chancellor for finance.
Right, and sorry, but the example you gave wasn't, the chief of staff spoke for the provost. He didn't speak he didn't act as the chancellor. So, and I would imagine that that was cleared through Dolores to do that.
So I'll use an example that just happened. So this past Friday and Saturday, I was at an SAL Arizona Leadership Summit event. The faculty called a study session on Friday. I was not available to be there, and the provost was also not available to be there. So we had other administrators who were there instead. So David Doré was the most senior administrator who was there at that meeting.
Any other discussion on this? Okay, with that, I would like to call for a vote. All those in favor of passing bylaw Article 14, please signify by saying aye or yes.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying nay or no.
Nay.
Nay.
Nay. So bylaw Article 14 does not get passed by a vote of 2 nays versus 3 yeses, or sorry, 3 nays and 2 yeses. The 2 yeses were Board Members Gonzalez and Board Member Garcia. 3 nays, Board Members Hay, Klinko, and Ripley. With that, Mary Ellen, does this conclude the bylaw review?
Yes, it does.
Any
It
other
does.
comments from Mary Ellen or the board? Yes, Board Member Hay.
Chair Ripley, I would like to thank Mary Ellen for expert opinions and advice and through this entire process, and staff, Katie. So thank you very much for your hard work on this. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. It's been a pleasure working with all of you, and I think this was very productive to move through these as quickly, really, as we did. And so thank you again for all of your help.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Sorry, any other comments?
Mary Ellen, I just want to say thank you also, but I also just want to note that we really agreed on 98% of the items and the text amendments in this document. It really was a very small handful of items that there was disagreement. So
Thank you for acknowledging that. I think, and Mary Ellen, thank you for acknowledging that too. I think it is important that as a board we agree on how to conduct ourselves and how to basically serve as oversight for the college. And again, thank you for your objectivity, your professionalism, your logic, your reasoning, and most of all for your patience. This was an arduous process over a summer and COVID and all kinds of delays. So thank you for all of what you've done. We really appreciate it. And now on to the business of college work. Thank you, Chancellor. Thank you, Council. Thank you, PCC TV, and all of those that have tuned in.
And special thank you to Andrea.
And of course,
absolutely.
always Andrea running around and doing all of the behind-the-scenes paperwork and the important stuff, keeping us together and honest. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining in, all of those that have streamed in.
Thanks very much.
This meeting is now adjourned.
Thank you.